A young lady just showed up one night at our support group for parents who had lost children. Her name, if I remember correctly, was Patricia, and her story had recently been shared in the Cincinnati newspapers. Patricia's 2-year-old daughter had fallen into the Ohio River and been swept away. And the girl's father had jumped in to try to save his daughter, and both were lost. I cannot pretend that I could understand the depth and intensity of Patricia's pain and loss. In the blink of an eye, all that she most loved and cherished had been taken away from her. In a life that was once filled with joy and peace and hope, now there was only a large empty hole. To put this in terms of this religious season, we might say that Patricia was walking her way of the cross at that time. This past Holy Week in Kenya, the people who were at Garissa University under the attack walked the way of the cross, and 147 Christians were martyred. And we cannot understand their depth of feeling. We cannot understand their walking the way of the cross as they did this past Holy Week. And those who survived, I'm sure, will have scars on their bodies and souls, like the mark of the nails on Jesus. And as the Anglican Archbishop of Kenya has written on Good Friday, we must not rush to the Easter day too quickly. Today we stand at the cross with Mary and the other women, heartbroken by loss and suffering, and despite the horror before their eyes, not running away. Mary Magdalene came to the tomb of Jesus, and when she saw the stone had been rolled away, she rushed back to the disciples saying, "They have taken our Lord out of the tomb, and we do not know where they have laid him." This was not a scene of Mary calmly repeating what she had seen. I see Mary on the edge of hysteria, anger, pain, all expressed in tears and words spoken in gasps. Jesus had been the light of Mary's life. Jesus had saved Mary, restored her to wholeness, made her feel special. In a life that was once filled with joy and hope, now there was only an empty tomb. Now there was only an empty hole in her soul. From the time of Jesus' rest until the early morning in the garden, Mary Magdalene had been walking the way of the cross. All that had given Mary's life healing and purpose and meaning had died on the cross with Jesus. And who could know the depth of Mary's pain? Who could know the intensity of her loss? Who could understand what she was going through? Actually, I think sometimes you understand, and I understand. Each of us in our own way has walked in the way of the cross. Or maybe we're walking the way of the cross this morning. All of us at one time or another, in one way or another, has crashed headlong into the barriers of life. Each of us has experienced that loss and pain, even on this joyous morning. All of us have known the frustrations of having our lives turned upside down. Was your loss that of Patricia or Mary or the students at Garissa University? Maybe it's been the loss of a job or the failure of a relationship, the disappointment of losing your life's dream somehow. Maybe you have known the frustration of crushing debt. Have you ever had to worry about where your next meal was going to come from? Have you held a late night vigil wondering where your teenager was? Walking the way of the cross takes many forms. And walking in the way of the cross is in some ways like walking the labyrinth, the maze, if you've ever done that. The path wanders back and forth. Sometimes you're very near to your goal, and sometimes you're farther away. Some legs of the labyrinth are short, others are longer. And at each bend of the path, you stop and meditate on the twists and turns of your life. You contemplate on what has been the price of your journey. How much has walking the way of the cross cost you? And make no mistake, the way of the cross does cost us something, sometimes quite dearly. But to share the life of Christ, we have no options. The path through the labyrinth of life, our way of the cross, often leaves us with empty holes in our souls, with unhealed wounds of our body and spirit, with unresolved conflicts in our relationships. Following Peter and John back to the tomb, Mary's tears watered the spring flowers along the garden path. Her sadness was unbearable. Her grief was crushing. And at the tomb, Peter and John were not sure what to believe. So they just left. And Mary stayed. And looking into the tomb, Mary beheld angels. And when she turned around, she saw Jesus standing there. But she did not know that it was Jesus. And Jesus said to her, "Woman, why are you weeping? Whom are you looking for?" And supposing him to be the gardener, she said to him, "Sir, if you have carried him away, tell me where you have laid him, and I will take him away." And Jesus said to her, "Mary? Mary?" And again, I think St. John underestimates the scene. Mary? It's the voice she recognizes. Is it her imagination? Is it just wishful thinking? Is there hope beyond hope? This can't be. Or can it? Or was this life's last cruel joke on her? Was this to be one more step on the way of the cross? One more empty space in her soul? And Mary turned around and she turned around and there was Jesus. She turned around and a new life began. Mary's journey on the way of the cross had ended in front of the empty tomb. And she took those first tiny steps on what we might call the way of the garden. The way of the garden. This is the path to life and healing. Here the scars of the cross are treated with tenderness and healing. Here the emptiness is healed, filled with the gentleness of the risen Lord. Father Eugene Kennedy, who's the biographer of Joseph Bernardin, one-time Cardinal Archbishop of Chicago, and before that Archbishop of Cincinnati, has written about the Cardinal. How many theologians miss what human beings can see so clearly? That Jesus beholds us not as men and women whose bills for sin must be paid, but rather as men and women whose wounds must be healed. The way of the garden is the way of healing. Jesus rose from the dead for Patricia and for Mary Magdalene and for the martyrs of Kenya. And he rose for you and he rose for me. He rose to show us that tomorrow is pregnant with hope and promise. He rose to tell us that the way of the cross is only one leg on our eternal journey. And now the time has come for us to enter into the garden. And like Mary, we may come to the garden weeping and hurting and numb and frightened and in despair. It is in the garden that we hear the living Jesus call us each by name. The way of the cross brings us to the edge of life, there to discover the center of life, inviting us to come into the garden of life and hope. So on this Easter Sunday, we all join together in proclaiming, Alleluia, Christ is risen. Come, let us begin a new journey. Come, let us walk hand in hand